Hello, this is Mark here at Garrett's Guitars, and I'm here to talk about handmade instruments and other kinds of custom instruments. You know, the pros and cons of making them, buying them, you as the user, you as the person who buys or sells an instrument, and just a big discussion on the entire state of what is a handmade instrument, what is a custom made instrument, and what are they worth a lot more money. So, let's go back to just talking about this general idea, and this is my postulate. I will say this is what I'm trying to. This is something I believe that I'm trying to prove, which is the more time a human spends working on an instrument, the better off the instrument ends up. And that when we talk about a master built custom shop kind of situation, some of it is just like a person spent a little more time and care making this instrument and therefore has embodied it with just a higher quality on every little level. It's all those little yes or no decisions. So if we take it, for example, someone making a handmade guitar that would take 4 to 6 weeks to make, um, everything's a yes or no decision. Is this right? Is this great? And sometimes you're going to back up and go like, oops, I ruined that nut. I'm just going to throw it out and start another nut. But as people learn their craft, they get better and faster at it, and they learn to make these decisions better along the way. They become better makers, their results become better. So, those are the pros. That the more time a person spends with an instrument, that's why I love, some of my favorite instruments are from the 50s and 60s, because they're factory made instruments. But there was no CNC at the time. There's just a lot of people gluing things into jigs and figuring things out. And even though it's a factory process, still the hands-on, like the burst on my Gibson Les Paul is kind of bad, but kind of great because back then someone just stood there with a spray gun and just kind of made the burst. Um, and so mine is kind of a boring burst, but it's a wonderful guitar, and I kind of like it's a boring burst. It's a one of its kind burst, and all these things, these factory made instruments are often one of a kind. More so than today, if you compare like one player series to another or something like that, they'll be essentially the same. Every instrument's different. That's why we actually encourage people to try out different instruments and even identical looking versions of a guitar. We'll say just try listen to them both, see if there's one you like better. So let's go back to a bit of the cons of handmade and custom made instruments. The biggest part of the con is the value of the instrument because you have this person outlaying a bunch of extra work to do it. The instrument you buy, that value does not translate over to the second or third owner because you said, I want this guitar made for me. You commissioned it, or someone made it and then you bought it and you're the first owner. Everyone wants to be the first owner of something that's special and unique. So the secondary market for those things is just not great, especially if it's like not as well known makers. So, for example, if your friend Bob's got a garage workshop and he's putting together Stratocasters and they're kind of cool and he's got a nice touch, that's great, and all the more power to him. But that custom made, handmade thing does not get a lot of benefit from being handmade, even if it's excellent. And I've run across this actually. There was someone came in with this guitar that was made here in Portland, Maine, nearby, and it's a guy who's just like making these things and selling them cheaply, and it was a fine guitar. And it was just like, I don't know who's going to buy this. It doesn't say Fender on it. It looks like a Telecaster, but it doesn't say Fender on it. It's a little quirky. You play it, it's great. You just pick it up and like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this instrument. But despite the fact that you paid a premium price for this, there's a drive it off the lot on that kind of thing that is substantial. Buying a secondhand handmade instrument can be great. We've sold a few great ones over the years that were like, you'd never heard of this guy. I remember this. There was this one guitar by a guy named Martin Taylor. I swear to God, that's how he signed his label, and that could have been the name he was born with. But if you type in Martin Taylor guitar in Google, God help you. That describes most guitars, acoustic guitars that are out there. Martin Taylor acoustic guitar. So it was really hard to find any information on the maker. It was obviously someone who, took some classes and then took his trade and went on with it. It wasn't a student instrument. It was a way to sell it cheaply because no one's ever heard of this guy. And someone did buy it and was happy with it. But to drive it off the lot is pretty substantial on those instruments. Now, let's talk about how it affects other factory-made instruments. Well, obviously there's custom shop and master built and all that kind of things that the big companies offer. Are these instruments much better? Maybe, and I say it's not necessarily even because their materials or design are any better. It's just because there's just more time put into the workmanship of making them. But once again, there can be a drive it off the lot where you pay for one of these things and they enter the secondary market, and people just kind of want to be the one to buy the special thing for the first time. So that can be a bit of a challenge. So let's go back to talking about the good things about the handmade instruments, having more human time spent on them. I find even like when we get a good factory-made instrument, like some Gretches behind me, they're fine factory-made instruments, but they always need human attention. The nuts are cast; they're a composite material that's cast, and no one ever ran a file through them. So it's really common on the Gretches and even on Taylors sometimes, or other someone came in with a guild that was like that. It's like, oh, my tuners, something wrong with my tuners. It's like, well, maybe I got a feeling that it might be your nut. Because, lo and behold, I could hardly get the first pass, I could hardly get the file in there, and the second pass I was like, oh, I just cleaned the slot and made it even, and just like someone who was making a nut would do. And by applying no pressure, by taking away almost no material, just took away the excess material that was causing the problem, and it was fine. And I do that regularly on a lot of guitars, including Gretsch guitars that come through here. So, just the time a human spends with things can make it better. And that has to do with art. The reason the Sistine Chapel is so beautiful is you spent, 30 years doing it. There is a knock-on effect of like, not knock-on isn't quite the way to call it. That's something that comes after something else. There is not necessarily, what I'll say is there's not necessarily a exponential or even one-to-one ratio on how much spending time on a build will improve it. But if you have a talented maker, then yeah, the time spent will improve it. Should you buy a handmade guitar? Only buy it if you love it and you want to keep it for the rest of your life. Because like I said, they're hard to resell, and sometimes they are not necessarily, financially, you can take a big hit because you're paying for someone's time. You're paying for their groceries for that month it took them. So you buy a custom-made acoustic guitar for $8,000, and that's not even a lot of money considering it was a month of someone's life, perhaps. And you just have to love it forever. Can you find great handmade instruments in the secondary market? Yes, and you should maybe consider that. But also, if you're playing instruments like I do from the 50s and 60s, there is more hands-on time, and that leads to something. And I don't want to get too metaphysical. It's the imparting of soul or something, but there is something. A piece of the maker goes into the handmade instrument. So we'll leave it there for now. Thanks for watching. There's a lot of other videos here on YouTube, so check those out. And check us out on all the other social media stuff too. And thanks for watching.